Let's be honest, waiting on God can feel like a test you didn't study for. You're showing up, doing your part, praying with everything you've got, and still, nothing. Doors stay shut, promises feel distant, and deep down you're wondering, did God forget about me? But what if the delay isn't denial? What if the silence is actually the space where God is working behind the scenes, not to punish you, but to prepare you? See, here's a truth most people won't admit. God's greatest moves usually start in hidden places. You don't see it, but He's shifting things, pruning what doesn't belong, and setting up something bigger than you imagined. The problem is, it doesn't feel holy. It feels like you're being overlooked. But trust this, just because it's quiet doesn't mean God isn't moving. Sometimes the quiet is where faith becomes real, where spiritual growth is forged, where faith over fear is tested for real. So if you're in a season where it seems like God is silent, don't click away. You're not lost. You're being led. This video will help you understand how to trust God in the waiting, how to stand on God's promise even when it feels shaky, and how to lean into God's timing without losing your mind. You'll walk away with real practical tools for building unshakable faith. Let's dive in. Understanding that God's silence doesn't mean absence. There's a dangerous assumption many people make. If God isn't speaking, He must not be working. But think about a seed underground. It doesn't make noise, yet something powerful is happening beneath the surface. Roots are forming, structure is being built. The same goes for your life. When it seems like God is silent, that's often when He's doing His deepest work in you and around you. You may not hear Him, but you're never outside His reach. Consider Joseph, betrayed, sold, falsely accused, and forgotten in prison. Yet all that time, God was aligning pieces, opening unseen doors, and positioning him for something far bigger than what he could have imagined. If Joseph had mistaken the silence for abandonment, he would have walked away from his destiny. But he held on to faith, even in the dark. That's what it means to trust God in the waiting. You keep walking even when the road disappears under your feet. So how do you do that when fear keeps whispering lies and your emotions scream for proof? Start with reminders. Write down the moments in your life where you saw God's faithfulness show up unexpectedly. Reflect on what you've survived. Create a space, maybe a journal, a whiteboard, or a quiet corner, where you return daily to remember. Just because you don't feel it doesn't mean God isn't there. Because very often, God is preparing you in the quiet for something that will speak volumes. Trusting God's timing. When everything feels late, it's wild how we say God's timing is perfect, but when it doesn't match our schedule, panic sets in. Let's be real. When you've prayed for months, maybe years, and still haven't seen the promise, it's hard not to feel like you've been overlooked. But here's the truth. Delay is not denial. God is not a vending machine. He's a master planner. What feels late to us might actually be perfectly on time for what God's purpose requires in your life. Think about people who rushed into things, jobs they hated, relationships that drained them, decisions they later regretted, just because waiting felt too slow. God isn't being cruel when He tells you to wait. He's being kind enough to protect you from premature exposure. Maybe the opportunity you're waiting for requires a stronger version of you. God's process is rarely fast, but it's always intentional. Spiritual maturity is built in the delay, not in the speed. One practical thing you can do right now? Audit your expectations. Ask yourself, is this frustration about God's delay, or is it about my impatience? Create space in your day to pause and say, even if it doesn't come today, I still choose trust. That's how you stay steady. Don't despise the pause, embrace it. Because while you're stressing over the when, God is preparing the how in ways you can't even imagine. Holding on to God's promise when doubt creeps in. Doubt doesn't always roar like a lion. Sometimes it creeps in quietly, when you scroll through someone else's testimony and think, why not me? Or when another prayer seems unanswered and you whisper, did I hear God wrong? That's when it gets dangerous. Not because you're bad for doubting, doubt is human, but because if left unchecked, it can slowly steal your passion, your purpose, and your peace. That's why holding on to God's promise is a daily decision, not a one-time pep talk. Let's get practical. What do you do when doubt hits hard? You fight it with reminders. Write out what God told you during your quiet time. Record voice notes for yourself, speaking life over your situation. Surround yourself with Christian encouragement from people, podcasts, books. And if you're tired of waiting, remember this: God's promise isn't fragile. Your delays, doubts, or detours don't cancel it. They just shape you to carry it with strength when it finally arrives. You weren't built to carry uncertainty alone. That's why faith over fear isn't just a phrase, it's a mindset you build. And you build it by showing up daily, even when your feelings tell you to quit. Doubt may knock, but it doesn't have to move in. So, when you're tempted to walk away, lean in even harder. Because what you're carrying isn't small, and what's ahead isn't random. God's guidance is leading somewhere specific, even if you don't see it yet. Recognizing God's preparation in the process. Most people only notice God's faithfulness when the promise shows up, but few realize that His fingerprints were all over the preparation. You know that job you didn't get? The relationship that ended? The delay that frustrated you? Yeah, those were all part of God's process, not punishment. He doesn't just prepare the blessing for you, He prepares you for the blessing. And that work happens in places where nobody's clapping, no spotlight is shining, and obedience feels really inconvenient. Think about it like this: if God handed you the promise too early, would you be able to sustain it? Would you have the patience, the wisdom, the maturity to carry it well? That season you're in, the stretching, the uncomfortable growth, the unanswered questions, isn't random. It's spiritual training. Athletes don't just show up to the Olympics. They sweat in silence long before anyone sees their victory. The same goes for you. God is preparing you, not punishing you. So how can you stay in alignment while being shaped? Start showing up in the small things. Be faithful where you are. Serve when no one is watching. Work with excellence, even if the task feels beneath your calling. That's how God sees you're serious. Your current season isn't a distraction, it's divine development. And while the world sees delay, heaven sees destiny unfolding step by step. Walking by faith. When you feel like giving up. Here's the raw truth. There are days when you'll want to quit. When your prayers feel like they're hitting the ceiling. When the pressure is heavy and God's promise feels like a fairy tale. That's the exact moment where walking by faith becomes more than a Christian phrase. It becomes survival. Faith isn't pretending everything's fine. It's choosing to move forward even when nothing makes sense. It's looking at the chaos and saying, God is in control, even now. Let's get real. Sometimes faith looks like crying while still showing up. Like writing out your dreams again, even after the last door slammed shut. Like telling yourself, I won't give up, even with shaking hands. That's spiritual breakthrough territory, not because it's glamorous, but because it's real. God sees that kind of fight. And believe it or not, it draws His presence like a magnet. Trusting God's process means staying planted when everything in you wants to run. So if you're on the edge of quitting, pause. Not to surrender, but to reset. Take a deep breath, remind yourself why you started, and keep showing up. Listen to Christian inspiration that lifts your spirit. Speak life out loud when your thoughts try to spiral. This is how spiritual encouragement becomes your fuel. Because you're closer than you think, and right when it feels the hardest, that's often when God will make a way out of nowhere. Let's bring it home. You weren't called to survive life, you were called to walk in purpose, even when the road gets messy. If you've been waiting, doubting, or wondering if God is working behind the scenes, let this be your confirmation. He is. Just because you haven't seen the results doesn't mean He's forgotten you. He's preparing the promise, building your character, and crafting something so much greater than what you've been imagining. So here's the challenge. Will you trust God even when the script doesn't make sense yet? Will you walk by faith, not because it's easy, but because you believe in the one who wrote the story? Will you hold on to hope even when silence tries to convince you otherwise? Because your promise isn't dead, it's just in progress. God's timing is still perfect. His purpose is still in motion. And your breakthrough? It's closer than you think. If this message stirred something in you, don't let it stop here. Comment below, "I'm trusting God in the waiting." Let's talk about it. Your story could encourage someone else right now. And hey, if this gave you clarity, peace, or even just a little hope to keep going, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications. We're building a space where faith grows, fear dies, and purpose comes alive. God is not done with your story. Stay with Him and watch what happens next.